Today is August 31st, 2019. I'm Cameron Wood here at the Clifton United Methodist Church in Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm here with Phebe Beiser and Victoria Vic Ramstetter. They're going to talk to us about the Ohio Lesbian Archives and the lesbian community in Cincinnati. Ladies, can you please kind of introduce yourselves and tell us about your work?
Age before beauty.
I'll take it. Or it could be. It's not necessarily an either or. So I go by Phoebe. I took that name, added that name in the 70s. It was a 70s creative and spirituality kind of thing with the women's community. Anyway, I am retired. And the archives, Ohio Lesbian Archives, is probably my most passionate project. We're totally volunteer, God forbid, yeah. We're volunteer, well, I don't want to get too much into the archives, but 30th, in another week, exactly 1 week, we're having a 30th anniversary of this organization as a single entity in a public space. So I was a librarian at the downtown Cincinnati Public Library, as turned out to be a career. I did not intentionally go into that, but it happened. What else? I facilitate a class part-time, and I do get paid at Women Writing for a Change, which also men and all genders now, but mostly women and girls. So that is another joy, writing, creative writing, and being with others doing that. And I live in an A-frame by a creek with a dog and a cat right now. Nature and animals are important to me and bring me joy. So that's enough to start.
I was born in Cincinnati, actually at Good Sam Hospital. I'm the oldest of 8. My mother had 9 kids in 12 years.
Oof.
And she said, your dad and I had chemistry. Right?
Yeah.
But anyway, growing up, my favorite songs as a little kid were Standing on the Corner, watching all the girls go by, and Itsy Bitsy Teeny Weeny Yellow Polka Dot Bikini. So somebody should have had a clue. But anyway, and I fell in love with a classmate in high school, and I remember thinking, at some point when I had these dreams about her, I finally thought, oh, you must be a queer. And then I thought, I don't want to cut my hair really short and drive a truck and smoke a cigar. Because my mother had a cousin who was a lesbian, and she was one of those kind of butchy lesbians, which I have always thought of myself as a more of androgynous kind of a lesbian, going both ways as far as like not really totally butch, not really totally femme. Just, I think that's part of the modern feminist movement, is to be able to be who you are without having to fit into any kind of little block or square or whatever. And especially, so we quickly got into the lesbian feminist movement, which kind of straddled the gay movement and the emerging feminist movement. And so a lot of people thought we were pretty radical, but not really.
Or maybe Midwest radical.
We lived together Phoebe and I lived together in a commune in Clifton, 2 different communes with some other women, lesbian feminists. And my best gay guy friend always digs at me about when he would come to visit. He makes up things too, and all of a sudden the call would go through the house. There's a man in the house. But anyway, we also, some older lesbians who really were radical, left Cincinnati to go to the land, and they gave us their traveling lesbian bookstore, lesbian feminist bookstore actually. So for a few years we had that in our living room, and women would come we'd end up having spontaneous discussions, and our house was kind of open, and that's how I met Phoebe. She came to buy books, and then she stayed.
You're not going to say the part about how I was so cute?
Oh, I did.
You're
I was
allowed to say
upstairs,
that.
and I came
You can
downstairs,
edit it out.
and I grabbed one of my roommates and took him in the kitchen. I said, "Who's that cute girl in the overalls?" And it was Phoebe.
The rest is herstory.
So anyway, what was I going to say? We used to have lots of dances, and that's how you met people, and gay bars, and
The 70s. We're talking 70s.
right. But before that, just to backtrack a little bit, I did come out with my softball coach.
That is such a stereotype.
Because, and story of my life, I had a unrequited love affair with this girl from high school. And so, and I still sometimes, of course, I can't help but think about her.
Wow, that is.
Although I've had quite a few other girlfriends in the meantime.
She's like the fantasy, the woman you'll never have or something.
Right.
Your muse, like your
My
earthly muse.
That's
or
right.
Something maybe, perhaps.
So, anyway, I don't know if that answers the question, but next.
No, I'd like to get into just spark some conversation with me. So I was born in Hamilton, Ohio. I like to say I survived Hamilton, Ohio. It's very, conservative. Whites on the west side, African American community, and some lower, class people on the east side. And it's like, so right from the start, it's like, this is not right. And then the Cohens, our babysitter, who I had a crush, my first crush, a babysitter, I'm sure. She was beautiful. People don't even like the Cohen family, like they're Jewish, and some people are against that. I found out about racism, anti-Semitism, like at an early age. I thought, this is so wrong, or what are they teaching us in school? We're not getting the whole story. So that did stick with me, those two examples. But in high school, I met Barbara, who we have reconnected on Facebook, and she lives in the greater Cincinnati area. But she knew there's a phenomenon called gaydar, radar, and you just somehow psychically know, or most of the time you're right. But Barbara told me she had a crush on the gym teacher, and I had a crush on the journalism teacher. And so we were friends, and I was not alone. We could talk and giggle about our crushes on our teachers. And I do believe, editor's note, no, crushes I think are very normal. In our case, it was a glimpse of lesbianism that was not on TV, in films, or anywhere. And we knew we needed to keep it quiet, be pretty invisible. So invisibility has been a theme in my life, and one reason with the archives, we don't want to be invisible. Vic and I grew up in the 50s, 60s. I'm a little bit older than her, not by much though. So we know what it's like to be invisible.
So you grew up in Cincinnati, but Phoebe, you came to Cincinnati. Was Cincinnati considered kind of a safe space?
No, for homosexuals.
Yeah.
No, but it was the bigger. In the area, it was the bigger city, we had Cincinnati, Columbus, Cleveland, and then Dayton, Toledo. But anyway, it was not as bad as Hamilton. It was the big city, and in the 70s, things were starting to happen. So I went to Miami University and graduated. And came out Christmas vacation, 1971. I literally followed Jean to Ann Arbor, and she brought me out. And there was kind of this understanding that probably something might happen. But we were not, lovers or girlfriends. It was, a friendly thing. Friends with benefits, I guess now they would call it. So I came out. But when I graduated with a bachelor's in English, I didn't want to teach, at least right away. I didn't want to teach. And I also did not. The worst thing that could happen is to come back home and live with my parents. I would be captive in Hamilton and get a clerical job. It's like I could never escape. Well, I didn't have a car. I mean, it just like, no, I'm not. I felt this like strong karmic message. Do not go back. You must stay up here. I got a girlfriend and we sublet an apartment for the summer. Anyway, I stayed up in Oxford for about another year. And then I did come down. And then there was one of like a handful of lesbians. Oh, there was gay activism. There was a group called Gay People of Oxford. And I know it was mostly guys. There was a lesbian couple. There was Debbie and Margie and me. And we were like this, it's kind of hard to explain. Threesome. Debbie and I were lovers, but then we broke up because Debbie and Margie got together, but we were all friends. But threesomes are very hard to try. Anyway, and the guys at the Gay People of Oxford would say, well, what do lesbians think about this? It's like, God, I've only been out a year. I really don't know. But it became clear I needed to move to the big city, the closest big city, which was Cincinnati. So, and that was 73 probably.
And she was the only single lesbian in the city for a while, so everybody thought she was a homewrecker.
But you know,
they told me that about you.
Well, but as we know, there always are long-time couples in the suburbs that you don't even know about until they break up and end up coming to groups and meetings. You know, my lover and I, my partner of 20 years split up. You know, and then you say, oh, there's other lesbians in the suburbs. There always are. Very quiet back then, of course. So there were some, but we find out from lesbians older than us, so in their 70s or 80s, that they would meet, you know, these cliques of people. I think there'll always be cliques or groups, specialized groups, but they would meet they'd have house parties and meet other couples and people. But maybe I was the single activist lesbian for a time. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Speaking of house parties, that reminds me, when I came out with my softball coach, there were different house parties with lesbians, and one of her best friend's parents were out of town for the weekend, so
dangerous.
Her best friend had a huge party in the basement, and I remember it was so exciting because I walked down the basement, and Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wheels were singing "Sock It to Me, Baby," and all these lesbians were bumping and grinding.
Yeah,
I thought,
wow.
Oh, I'm home.
No, really. You could be free. I mean, the parents were gone. Hopefully they didn't come home early. Well, just girls having a party.
But everybody was in the closet, really.
It had to be.
And I didn't really understand that. And my lover would say, well, there were like these places, like Chicago. If you go to Chicago, you can hold hands on the street. Yeah, nobody knows you in Chicago. But it was seen as kind of Nirvana from Cincinnati. It was more of an open city. So they would talk about that. And I remember thinking, I don't want to live like this. What's wrong with being in love with a woman? You know, from the very beginning, I had no guilt about it. And I thought, why should I change myself, like hide or try to go straight or whatever, when I can change the world?
Yeah.
Because that just totally made sense to me, to help the world accept us. And so that's been part of, I think, both of our goals has been to be, and I found that the more I came out and the more comfortable I was with myself and not even thinking about that I was doing something wrong or something weird or whatever.
Sinful.
The more,
what about sinful? Yeah, sinful.
Yeah, I didn't really get so much of that. But I just realized that because I was more comfortable, that other people become more comfortable with you. And so it was not that big of a deal eventually to just blab to everybody, you know, that I was a lesbian, because they became really comfortable. And a lot of times they would say, oh, I knew that. So.
And that reminds me of, again, I feel so fortunate to have been young. I mean, in my 20s, in the 70s, I was still up at Miami University. And I was, well, I say it was a time of, the L word was not lesbian person, really not that early, really, but liberation movements. Well, the yippies and the war was Vietnam War, and we did come down to Cincinnati for some, and Hamilton around the courthouse, anti-Vietnam War marches, and what else? Oh, there were free university classes where some of the women would try to learn electricity or about cars. I didn't have a car, so it was a moot point. But electricity, some of the basics of electricity, which I've totally forgotten. But, just very, I think there was some socialist groups and, what else? Anti-war, pro-drug, drug experimentation, shall we say. I found the alternative crowd. Miami is big, or at least was big on fraternities and sororities. I believe still is a lot. But I found the alternative people and friends of friends, and some weren't. And at some point, a couple of them weren't even taking classes at Miami, but they, rented a house there, and we would get together, and many of us ended up gay or bisexual. Yeah, the 70s was a time of questioning, and we realized, we have been lied, or a lot of history has been omitted from our textbooks and high school and college, and it was a time to be really live and activist. So that really was the roots of my activism, I would say. Yeah.
So you consider yourself an activist?
Yes, and still, and even with the archives, which it doesn't seem like a lively place. Well, maybe with more of these paintings, pictures put on the walls, it's more lively. But a repository of books and articles and flyers of gay and lesbian events from the 80s, 90s, and on, some 70s. Those flyers, way before the internet and cell phones, the flyers would be tacked up on kiosks, by graders in Clifton.
Windows.
Yeah, windows, passed around at events, different events, let people know. And there was a lesbian newsletter, really, called Dinah, and it lasted from the late 70s to, I think, the early 2000s. Can't quite remember, but a long time, spanned quite a few decades. And it was activist to have a calendar. Here are the events going on. Jerry Falwell, fundamentalist, I was going to say, I don't know if I can say that word, fundamentalist preacher who became activist on the right. And it's like
anti-homosexual. That was his downfall.
And Anita Bryant, but he came to Cincinnati, so you had to hustle to get the word out. Phone, landlines, flyers. He's going to be in Cincinnati. We're going to be at City Hall. I mean, think of that kind of activism. City Hall, try to be there. We want numbers out there and say, go away. We don't agree with your philosophy. So, yeah, but the flyers, but we've kept these flyers, which are grassroots history that a lot of it would be lost because it's not in the local papers at all, or on TV. Yeah, so.
That reminds me of a couple years ago, I went to D.C. with one of my gay best boyfriend, and to see Romaine Brooks' exhibit. And it was an exhibit that I had wanted to see for many, many years. She's a famous lesbian painter. She was lovers with Natalie Barney, who they called the Amazon, and the wild girl from Cincinnati and Paris, where they were all living in the 20s, 30s, 40s.
The expats. Yeah.
So I was so excited to go to that, and he ended up going with me, and we saw another gay guy that I knew there. But I started reflecting on the only times I had ever been to D.C. were getting on a bus at night, getting off the bus in the morning and marching, and getting back on the bus at night. And I had done it like 4 different times, twice for gay marches, once for Women's Pentagon Action, and once was for that what was that thing that they tried to pass about the equal rights?
The ERA,
Yeah.
yeah, it still has not passed.
Right,
Equal
right.
rights,
So those 4 times
amendment
were the
to
other times I'd
Act.
gone to D.C. and I thought, that's so weird. So
Just for art, and that art, I mean, they were filthy rich for the most part, Natalie and Romaine, and they're kind of like role models because they lived, as Vic had said, lived their life freely. I am who I am. Just get over it.
Yeah.
Get over it. Yeah. So it's
which
like
has been our attitude,
in the
really.
early 1900s, basically, wasn't it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And in your face, lesbian, but they had the money and the means to live their life and paint and have salons and hang out with these painters and writers.
But we were definitely self-educated a lot as far as lesbian feminism evolving, and it all started with the search for books, which is voila.
Yeah.
But I remember I looked in the library downtown in a card catalog. There were a couple weird homosexual studies that were listed, but they were no longer in the library. And somehow I heard about, I don't know how, but I must have tried to do some research. Maybe the Well of Loneliness was one that was there, and then I found it in a bookstore, a used bookstore, and it really wasn't worth all that because it was very sad and depressing. But when it was published in 1928, it was banned in most countries. And it was, even though it had a really sad, depressing ending.
There were no sex scenes. There were no sex scenes. It was all about. Were there? As I recall, maybe she.
There were
kissed a
lots of
woman,
things about feelings and kissing.
feelings. Yeah,
But no raw sex. That's true.
Attracted to women.
So
yeah,
So just the fact that it was about women loving women.
we might get ideas. Women around the world might get ideas. Ooh.
So
Independent
and then,
ideas.
I'm not exactly sure what happened. How eventually I heard about the Lesbian Feminist Bookstore, and that was the
You mean
older, more
archives?
radical.
Archives.
No, the Lesbian Feminist Bookstore, Labras.
Oh,
the
okay.
older lesbians in Cincinnati, which I had gradually heard about, that they were like really hated men. And I knew
the
it wasn't
patriarch.
that kind of a lesbian.
More the patriarchy. The one had been married to.
But that's
man.
what,
Yeah.
right, but that's what I thought. Or that's what the rumor was, because we had a gay women's alliance, which we were all kind of alike.
Yeah.
As far as college students, still lipstick lesbians for the most part, and that sort of thing.
And this group was very angry and said, man, the patriarchy, and I went through a phase like that. And I don't forget that patriarchy. And look at the people running this country. We'll just leave it at that.
But I remember the time we decided to have a joint meeting, and they came, and 3 of them came from like the class that they took about repairing cars. So they were like, they didn't have bras, which I hadn't gotten to that point yet, and they were like covered with grease, and it was like so odd because they were so different.
Tough.
But then we found out that they had a bookstore, so I was like, oh my gosh. So gradually, maybe they had 10 books, I don't know, but maybe more than that. Because they had a lot of socialist kind of books too, because a couple of them had come from Yellow Springs, and they were more like that sort of radicals. Mm-hmm. And then they gradually, everybody kind of came together under the gay lib, and then because lesbians didn't really feel that included. And so we started our own little groups. But the books there, I think about Ruby Fruit Jungle because that's like the first one, Rita Mae Brown, and it was like a happy book. It was a kind of
fun.
Course,
it was fun.
It was really fun, coming of age, and just really entertaining. And then they had some other books like that, and they weren't. And gradually, sometimes you would find some really old books with, you could tell it was lesbians, like Living in the Shadows, and they'd be like. Half undressed, and one would be kind of butch and one would be kind of femme. And so you'd read those, and they'd all have unhappy endings too, like the one would get married.
Anne Bannon is a name.
As one,
series of.
So it was so much fun to read these new books that were coming out.
At least it was about lesbians, even if,
And
Some
and
of
a
them
lot
were
of them
kind
were,
of sad or shadowy.
but the ones with the at the Labus books, they were really positive and happy and great, and we could keep up with every single book that came out. No kidding. So maybe they were like 3 or 4
They
year
were
at the
independent
most.
women's
Right, small
or lesbian
presses.
yeah.
Which we have
Which
many
we've saved.
first editions here. We even have a first edition of The Well of Loneliness.
Yeah.
And so that was so exciting. That was kind of, it gave us, what is it?
Hope.
And kind of ratified what we believed.
That's true.
So,
So we both believe in the power of the printed word. I mean, we really,
right.
you know, we both were college educated. I mean, we've been
And so
through
gradually,
that.
more and more books came out. We got review copies, and we bought lots of books, and we reviewed books for Dinah. And pretty soon, you couldn't read every book that came out.
Yeah, which is, like now. Yeah,
No, there's no way.
keep up with it.
But we're not
I
complaining.
fall asleep. Because at night I fall asleep. Okay, I has to be during the day. That's an elder thing, perhaps.
Oh.
It's a nice problem.
And then we both
abundance of
have
books.
been involved in writing. We taught a poetry class with UC's
Was it free?
University.
Free
University, right?
First, then
For a few years.
Then the free got lost somewhere along the way. What's that say? University, community.
And then we started writing our own books, and Phoebe's published a couple books of poetry and a couple of, most
You as
recently, she published with another woman who's Indian, so it has like the two cultures, one's straight, one's a lesbian, and it's called the bitch and
the Buddha and the bitch.
The Buddha and the bitch, and she's not the bitch.
Yeah, believe it or not.
The other one, the Indian woman who's
some of my ex-friends
who's
thought
in an
I was the
arranged
bitch.
marriage and everything, but she's,
They thought she
she's
was
out
the
there.
Buddha. She had to be the Buddha because she lives in India. So,
But she
Isn't-
wanted to be the bitch.
yeah, she's self-defined bitch. Yeah. So
And then-
speaking of feminism, I am bitch. If that means, assertive, make sure I'm mind up and.
Right, like I like
Anyway.
some postcard that I have on my desk at work. You call me a bitch like it's a bad thing.
That's a good one. I wonder who that is. Anyway, so the books.
So anyway, just being, but then I think at some point went through a kind of really more radical kind of angry phase. And we didn't really say there's a man in the house, but he wasn't really that welcome.
I mean, if you're running
my
around
roommates.
just with a T-shirt on, just to.
No, we really
know.
didn't associate with men then.
No, I'm saying when Nick came in the house.
Right.
Just if because with other women you can just have your T-shirt on or something. It's like you might put underpants on.
But
or
that's
shorts
not really
on.
why. Nobody really wanted to hang with men, even gay men, at some point
Yeah.
during a
Like
kind
it's
of couple-year
too much.
period.
Took a lot of our
Right.
psyche. Yeah.
Right. And so eventually you mellow out, and eventually we met gay guys who were kindred spirits, and weren't, because a lot of gay guys, if you're too young to remember, but back in the early 70s, gay men had their own culture, and
Disco.
it didn't include lesbians, because lesbians were seen as, sometimes there was a lesbian who would
We were
fall in
too
love with a
wholesome.
drag queen, but but usually lesbians were seen as other and kind of low class,
Well, in the bars.
not educated, not good jobs, because lesbians didn't get good jobs, because if somebody saw you as a lesbian, like if you nobody thought you were a lesbian, but you had real short hair and wore men's clothes.
You weren't
People
playing the
figured it
game,
out,
the
even
nice
if you didn't
dress
think,
game.
even if you thought it was a secret, it wasn't a secret. So
Yeah.
that influenced what kind of jobs they could get. A lot of them were blue collar jobs and not that much money and all that sort of thing. And then a lot of lesbians got married because they wanted to have kids, and that's all different now, because with turkey baster babies and whatever, you can just have kids. So, but thank
Or
God.
find a very nice looking gay male friend, and
That's
make an arrangement. I mean, that happens a lot.
So anyway, and I think, so it had to do with mellowing, and it had to do with going back in a way to that whole liberation movement, the equal rights for gays and lesbians and African Americans and Native Americans, how all those kind of movements kind of meld together and have a ebb and flow with each other. And at some point you realize it's all the same. It's like, if I'm liberated and somebody else isn't liberated, then that's wrong.
It's still
So
not even. And how can I say? And I think it's okay. There are at least phases of different groups, and even now sometimes, like women writers, the women just want to share, their stories that other women will understand, and that's not even talking politics so much. I think it's fine for Black people to just be by themselves at certain times and talk about their experience. How can I get through the week? It's so racist out there, and they all understand. And lesbians, gay men, or sometimes we come together, rallies against, fundamentalists, the big marches, Pride Day week, month, now it's Pride Month, really. We come together and march and play and dance and all that, And if there's a big issue, like Cincinnati, I never can remember the dates, but in the 90s, the city voted, it was very conservative on city council, and they voted that it was okay to discriminate. It was legal to discriminate against homosexuals, basically. Issue 3 and Article 12, and it's kind of a maze to piece them together. But yeah, it was put on the ballot to vote, and the city limits voted, and that it was okay for employers and landlords to not have to, be nice to homosexuals, and there was a Boycott Cincinnati group said, let's get these conventions coming in once a year, annual conventions, to not come. Or I know one group went to Mason, Ohio, just outside Hamilton County. Mason instead, teachers, I'm trying to think who all. Teachers, maybe the NAACP, several groups did not come and have their summer convention here, and the city lost, tens of thousands, maybe $100,000, a lot. And then it's like, and we got, voted in more open-minded liberal council people, and that changed. But there was a really, I would say, dark period in the I think early in the 90s, where there weren't even, symbolically, there were not even gay prides. I say gay for short, even though now it's LGBTQ, IA, etc. There were no prides for a couple of years. People were so, activists were so, felt so beaten down. It's like, God, they voted against our lives. It was very
so that
demoralizing.
So that is the thing now. There's a lot of young girls who think, why feminism? That's
and they even
past.
have there's post-feminism.
Right, whatever that is.
In academia,
and you think
it's not post.
It hasn't even been 100 years since white women could vote, and it's only been 50, 60 years since African American, including African American women, could vote. And you think everything changes depending on who's in power. Some people say, why don't you move the archives into a university library or another library? And the reason why we keep it as a separate entity is just for those reasons, that political climate can change anytime, and somebody could just say, oh, why are we hanging on to this crap, and chuck it all. Yeah. So that's why it's very important. And the name Ohio Lesbian Archives, we picked that because for many years we were in the gay movement, and everybody would say, oh, that includes lesbians, or just the feminist movement, because men, in the language, men is supposed to be, when you're reading, it's supposed to be men or women. It could be
humankind,
whatever, but not really. So that's why we want to be straight up front. Even though we have a huge gay history section, we have we are collecting and preserving a lot of newsletters and flyers and things from many different gay and lesbian organizations in this tri-state area. So I forget where else I was going with that. Somewhere
It happens.
It'll
We're
come back
elders.
to me.
And so we're more than Ohio too. We're kind of the greater Midwest. There is the lesbian, the mother of all archives, the lesbian herstory, and they were 70s thing, the lesbian herstory archives, and they're basically U.S. though they probably have international things. We have some. Vic and I visited a house in Brooklyn at this point, an entire house, and they were so glad that. To meet us and to know that there could be more regional archives. They said, God, we really need it. We come here and there's boxes of books and things, like it's just too much. No one institute, no one group can keep this. So that we got their blessing. And what else about that? Oh, so we're more than Ohio. In fact, we're running out of space. So one of our big goals and needs is a larger space, which we're working on, and more money for the finances, always donations. We are 501c3. We should say that. But we're more than lesbian, so we have some trans people. With the younger people visiting that I've met recently, non-binary. I mean, we're growing and learn as elders. We're learning new terms and new concepts. Binary,
But as English majors,
I'm
not going to call a single person them.
Yeah, this non-binary person I know goes her pronoun. Well, yeah, the pronoun is they, so I understand it intellectually. But it's like as an English major, it's hard to just change over, But we'll learn.
Go back to the drawing board, kid.
Oh yeah, well, controversy. But anyway, so we collect. We have a cross-border trans newsletter from way back in Cincinnati. What else? So we're more than we're becoming, and archives is basically a reference library. But Nancy Yarian, who we should give a lot of credit to, a actual history major from Smith College, who's now going out of state with a graduate degree. She started we have a Facebook page. She started calling it a museum because we have pointing to the softball trophy, Dinah softball trophy in the, maybe 80s, I forget offhand. We have, gay trivia sets. What else do we have? Statues. We have Wonder Woman on our door, but we can't prove that Wonder Woman was a lesbian, but she did grow up in Amazon and, watch the movie and watch the beginning of the movie again. It's inspiring. And Ellen, we have a file, some celebrity lesbians, just to keep us going as long as we have space in the file cabinet. But academic books, little homemade books, small press, independent books, and books that you might be able to find on Amazon and have delivered to your door, but so many of them quickly go out of print. So, yeah.
Well, I would say, too, that I'm really proud of us because from the moment we identified as activists and we're actively trying to change the world, we have not let up on that goal.
That's true.
And the archives is not just some little pretentious hangout for intellectuals.
No, not at all.
And we see it as a activist part of our lives, really.
And it does all the materials literally trace our lives, 70s, 80s on.
Right.
And changes and where were you going with that? Do you know? Where are we going to that?
Maybe Cameron has a question that can prompt us.
Yeah, right. I think our batteries are running down, yes.
So what has been what do you think is the most rewarding part about working on the archives?
That we know we're changing history, that we know it's important. It was important no matter if anybody else thinks it's important. We know it's important.
Yeah, because those early decades, a handful of us collecting things. And when women would, move to Florida, retire, we've had quite a few couples, retire, move to Florida, we can't throw, they feel like, they know they can't throw, they just feel like, oh, we can't throw away these magazines or these books, maybe the archives. Oh, we can give them to the archives. They would keep them. So, starting to trust us. And I forget, I was going to say something else too. I'm blanking. Oh, for me, what's really rewarding, especially this summer with the 50th anniversary of Stonewall, there have been a lot more visitors. And in summer, you tend to have more people too, as opposed to winter. But I've met a lot of younger, I say younger, well, I'm in my 60s, so younger covers a lot. But I mean, people in their 20s and 30s. And they just have so much energy. I always, I might like drag myself in, even though I'm mostly retired, drive in, it's like, oh, show the archives is a stranger. And, by the time they leave, like we've had this, here's kind of what we have and collect, and what are you have any special interest. And I always go away, I usually learn something from the visitors, and always go away with more energy from there. I suck up, vampires suck up this useful energy. No, really, and their interests, and some people, I mean, most of them will say, oh my God, they just can't believe, and they can't believe there weren't smartphones and the internet. I mean, that's one of the big ones. They just can't believe, I like to think they feel empowered seeing all these images, especially now that we've put all these paintings up. What all in these books that go way back, when you see a whole room of lesbian and gay people, images, it's, where else can you see something like that, really?
Although
it's empowering.
it is revitalizing.
And to us to walk in like, really, these paintings have really made a difference. Not everything's in file cabinets, because it doesn't come alive till you start taking flyers out, and, oh, wow, this happened in 1982,
So I think the thing that's the most disturbing is that whole idea of post-feminism, that whole idea that gay people, we can get married now in some places.
Well, that's a good one.
It's fine, blah, blah, blah. But then you have a president who says, if I'm reelected, I'm going to get rid of AIDS. And I think to myself, what are you going to do? Put people in concentration camps?
Yeah.
Because then the same president pointed to Pence and said, and it has to be, well, anyway, and said something like, he wants to hang them all about gay people. And you think, these people in power are actually saying things like that. And you think, oh, everything's good. No.
Or some people that have not been through, don't feel the discrimination and the invisibility and the hiding, the enforced invisibility, because it wasn't safe. Like, would you have to see a psychiatrist? Would your social life be really watched or blocked, or, with suspicion? Some people haven't experienced some of that. But some do. When you have a job and all different kinds of people, you don't know how, safe you are until you meet the personalities. And as a general rule, at least these, a lot of the younger people I've met have found like-minded people to hang out with. And the younger generation, which is pretty broad, is pretty cool with, like, of course, I have gay friends and trans friends, what's the problem? What's the big deal? Which is very encouraging, but there are forces stronger than, us politically to still be aware of. And we remember times like that, the dark times. So we, keep watch, like, we don't want this to happen again.
And throughout history, even starting with Sappho, who could write her lesbian poetry and live her life, and then for, I don't know, thousands and thousands of years, there was no gay literature.
Yeah. Or all underground.
Or, right.
Or just, personal relationships on the side or something.
And the really thing that breaks my heart is that gay people would internalize that self-hatred and hate themselves and want to hurt themselves or not want to live.
And that still happens. Teenage
young people
are
bullied
and commit suicide more than non
So that's another
non-gay
part of the
teenagers.
activism is to help build a community, a self-confident, self-loving community that fits in with the world, and that also helps change the world, not just in their lives, but in other oppressed people's lives too. So,
and I don't think we've mentioned before we started filming. I did mention Crazy Ladies Bookstore and Center, Women's Center, where the archives had a small room on the 3rd floor above the bookstore. But that was a meeting to have a space like that. So 1989 is when we started that room. To have a physical space is so important.
season of all the feminist bookstores that opened around the country, and gay bookstores, and then one by one closing. And that really
made a difference. It made a difference. And so what do? We after Crazy Ladies, it was depressing. Well, that's how we ended up in a room at the Clifton United Methodist Church. And this church is welcoming. We're not members, but we very welcoming to any outsiders, really, whether lesbian, gay. They have a sign up that says, they say, was a refugee. Jesus was a refugee. I forget a woman, I can't remember who out there. But anyway, they are a sanctuary kind of a church, and to any so-called outsiders. So we feel comfortable here. And so this church is a safe space. I guess I'm going to safe spaces.
So there are Christians that try to help people instead of hurt people.
Hurt people.
Which is very encouraging.
And space. I guess the space. I'm kind of on a space, physical space. There are some like gay. I would say for gay bars like Tilly's in Northside. They have trivia night. I mean, it's not just get drunk, and they don't really have big dance space. More friendly community feel where people can talk to each other. There are some bars and spaces like that. I guess, or maybe people don't feel they need spaces as much since they have the internet, can meet people and then go, But there is some talk. Some of the younger gay activists right now, and I know from groups on Facebook, there is some of them are talking about they want a physical gay community, for sure, gay community center. And some of the oldsters, especially the older gay guys like Michael, our friend Michael, are saying, okay, but we did it, so there's this discussion. Well, we did it, and it takes people power, money, it's just don't deceive yourself. It's a lot of work, So there's sort of like, cautioning the younger people, but then balancing all this and having conversations, hopefully, and discussions about, where it could be and how it would look, and is there really the energy like this to stick with it, not like, be exciting, there is one now, who's going to keep the lights on every night when people come by, they want to have discussion groups, all that. It is a lot of work. So so that was interesting that there's this, in spite of all the internet and bars and Pride. I mean, Pride is 1 month. Well, there'll be gay history coming up in October. There'll be some activities around that. But what do you do the rest, from January to May, come to the archives, be online, watch TV shows that have cool characters and stuff like that, but to meet people and have friends and feel any sense of community. It's kind of, to me, it's kind of strange that we still have, there's still a need to find that, even though we have same-sex marriage. We're fairly free. We're the freest we've been in our lifetimes, and I never thought I'd see wasn't a big issue for me, but same-sex marriage, I never thought I'd see that in my lifetime.
Right, right.
Yeah. as the big federal, issue that is positive and not against gay people. And so I'm winding down here. What else?
So I was thinking too that I guess with the archives, we've kind of found our niche,
Yeah.
our niche.
Obviously. Depends if you're in France or
I
United
know.
States, how you say it, I guess.
But anyway,
Say more about that.
and I think if everybody in the world found something they could do to help save the world as far as a free, happy place, I think that would be a good thing. And we found it.
And there are some groups
For us, that's
nationally, save the environment. You say you save the environment, but you got to narrow it down. Like your friend in Alaska was very involved and still is, Greenpeace, and she's in Alaska, so she deals with Alaskan issues a lot. And there is a fear of losing some of that land to oil and gas, drilling. I don't know, find your passion, like you said, and do the work that fulfills you, that interests you, and you might have to narrow it down pretty much. I mean, Ohio Midwest Lesbian and Gay Library. I mean, that's one. It sounds like a small thing. It is, but it's a lot of work, and it can flourish. Flourish. But you have to hang in there during. When people don't come by in the winter, it's like, well, we take a little rest. I mean, a well-deserved rest. And what did you said along the way, not so long ago, is we do what we want, have fun doing it.
Right. That's sometimes Phoebe would get a little down and say, Phoebe,
people aren't interested. What's going on?
Don't get down on yourself. If you get tired, just take a break.
Yeah, take a break.
And so sometimes we've kept, when we were, the 30-year anniversary has to do with being at Crazy Ladies and being open to the public.
So we've been here 13 years. Yeah.
Right, of 13. The 30 years. But that's when it started. Before that, it was in Phoebe's apartment and
various places.
Right. And so anyway, so to have my thought come back to me, I don't know.
Don't become old. That's our advice. That we used to be open certain nights. We tried.
Oh, right. That's what it was.
We'll be open Tuesday nights from 5 to 7, or Thursday night, or whatever. And sometimes people come, but mostly they would. You can't just get. There's not a formula like what night of the week or day of the week is best. And
if we had a student intern from one of the colleges, we would work with their schedule and be open then, as well as working with the student. Mm-hmm. But I know several years in a row, I kept it open on Tuesday and Thursday nights. And sometimes nobody would come often. Although a lot of people would drop by more often at Crazy Ladies because they would go to a meeting and then they just wander upstairs.
We
had a library outside of multiple copies of books that they could just borrow.
Duplicates, yeah.
And we could do that again, but I don't know if the church really wants us to.
Things to explore.
Clutter up their hallway.
Maybe 10 books at a time.
But when we move, we can do that again because we still have those library books. Yeah.
So you said you got the space in 1989, but when did you?
Above Crazy Ladies.
Above Crazy Ladies, when did you start collecting?
All throughout the 70s, really. Once there started being lesbian books,
right,
and in vinyl records, there was a lot of flourishing. What they call women's music.
And then envisioning
women would come to town and have concerts.
And envisioning the Lesbian Archives occurred after Phoebe and her lover, who just passed away, had gone to the Lesbian History Archives, which we had heard about and we had been sending things to. And I think, even when you were there, she thought, why don't we do that in Cincinnati? Have it be open to the public.
But you get the credit. In Dinah early on, you said anyone. We had a little space in the issue, a little empty space where an ad would go. Paid ad should go, and you put anyone interested in maybe just put women with a Y or something. Women's history group, or leading to an archives, but no one really. We were interested.
Right, it was lesbian history, right?
Lesbian history, no one came forth like, oh, I'd be really interested until later. You just can only control so much, or the energy has to be there. And it wasn't until the 80s, mid 80s, right before when Crazy Ladies bought a building, we said, we are very interested in a room. I mean, we'll do whatever, scrape wallpaper to earn that room and pay a nominal amount. But there were some younger, partly driven by a couple younger women and women my age, said, yeah, this is important, like a history. You don't even know Connie from way back. I don't know where she is now. But a student was involved, and then some of us older lesbian activists. Yeah, this sounds like a cool thing. They love to read books. I mean, you only have to love to read books to like a library.
Vic, I asked Phoebe, and I get the feeling you've thought of yourself as an activist for quite a long time.
It's just it.
Yeah.
With the liberation movements, with anti-war, and women's and feminism, and then later, lesbian and gay. I'm lesbian, so not just a feminist, but lesbian. And so then you have your foot in lesbian community, gay community. Well, you need 3 feet. Lesbian, gay, and women's, And if you're African American or disabled, God, you got 5.
Lots of hats.
Quantifiers, yeah. But you were.
So Vic, do you consider yourself an activist?
Oh yes, definitely.
You were the president of the
UC Gay Society when I was in college, and I was
lot.
one of the co-founders of the Cincinnati Gay Women's Alliance, because we weren't comfortable with dyke or lesbian at that point, So you continuously evolve.
Yeah.
So I've always done things like that. I remember the first Gay Pride March in Cincinnati. Phoebe was in it. I didn't know her then.
I went to it. 1973.
1973. But I went down with one of my friends, the young lesbian. We were all like 17 or something like that, 16, 17. And my best gay boyfriend, I can't stop talking about,
just say Nick.
He's really a cool guy.
His name's
But
Nick.
anyway, so he was afraid to go in the march.
Oh. Wow.
So we just followed along on the sidewalk.
Okay.
I know.
But you were there. Yeah.
So we didn't want to leave him to go march. Well, probably didn't feel that comfortable, but if he wanted to do it, all 3 of us would have done it. But so.
And it was small in 1973.
And he's gotten to the point now. He's been like the faculty advisor for the gay group at the college where he teaches, and so people evolve at their own rates as well. But I guess I would just urge people to think about. Don't get too comfortable ever, because things could always change.
They are changing.
I mean, just that a president would be talking about hanging gay people in public.
I mean,
it's
even
like,
a
really?
joke. I mean, that is not a joke.
That's not a joke.
That's
not funny.
So,
So, that's all.
and even even an archives might think, oh, it's laid back, kind of obscure library or something, focused, but to preserve into these women's in particular words and images, and to call this to be deal with IRS and become a 501c3 lesbian archives and have this name on the door and all this, be out there in City Beat and in the world online. It is activism, an act of empowerment to even say the word lesbian still in 2019, it's a symbol, it's symbolic, and it is a strength to have such an small institution, small room that it is. We have probably nearly 1,000 books. We were going to do a count sometime in our spare time. Vic still works full time, so our hobby / passion. But it's a place of empowerment, and that is an act. It is an act to keep this door open, really, and to use words that are not taken kindly by everyone, even in 2019.
And also to always have in the back of your head, and this is true for gay men, it's true for every woman and every lesbian, that when you least expect it, somebody who doesn't like gay people could commit a hate crime.
Good point.
So that's always a possibility, and that's always been, you just never know if you like
Fall into the parking lot, or we haven't had the windows smashed or anything like that. But any of these things could happen. Could happen. When you
and
least
a lot of
expect
people, and it's not just like gay people or lesbians or whatever, but a lot of women don't think about walking alone in the dark at night, and you should be able to do whatever you want. That's why we would go camping at the Michigan Women's Music Festival year after year after year, because it was like the one place where you could feel absolutely safe.
And because you had women watching all night, you had like guards, security. You had security
on the
observing.
right.
You had perimeters out this huge, however many acres
And
of fields.
You could
had
walk
to
around
have someone
naked
do that job
and feel totally
Whatever.
safe.
Yeah.
So
Is there anything else you'd like to say? Because I think I was going through
Kinda
it, I think
covered-
about everything.
No, make it. We got to end strong though. This is we're kind of limping along now. So edit it.
I would say definitely find your love, find your passion,
Your passion.
find your way to help make the world a better place, and just do it. No matter
do what you love.
no matter
do
what,
you love.
right? No matter what anyone else thinks, just own it, do it. Don't despair. Realize that your energy sometimes is going to go down or up. Sometimes you're going to have helpers, and then sometimes not. And just make your own commitment to something.
Yeah. Don't find like-minded people to do whatever you love to do. What a hobby becomes a passion. Saving some books becomes this lifelong. This 30 years is a career. I mean, it is.